Misty, and she's been on Tennie Talks with us. She lives out in the Bay Area, close to San Francisco, and she's world renowned. She is known throughout the spiritual movement, religious movement, Pentecostal movement for a singer-songwriter, has been honored many times and has traveled the world. But anyway, she just passed away in her sleep a couple of days ago, and we just, like I said, just our hearts are heavy in thinking about the family. And but you know, when her husband found her, she had a smile on her face, and what we make up is she closed her eyes and was in heaven and saw Jesus and smiled. So, you know, that's the way to go. Is to, you know, that's how I want to go, is just go to sleep. So we're going to talk about something that is really dear to my heart, and that is all addictions. When I first went into the field, and it's been about 50 years ago, I was figuring it up, and I had just, you know, gotten my license, and I thought I knew something, and I did know some things. I mean, I went to school, I knew some things, but I had to go and apply it at a treatment center. Well, there wasn't any at all around. And so I needed to do some internship. So there was an old flop house here. It was just a detox center, and it was just a low income, basically men would come in and detox. Long story short, I went to work there, and you know, I'm a good codependent, good Al-Anon, and I saw its possibility, and I got me some people on board through the AA and Al-Anon community, and we got to rolling on that, and got a good board of directors. And so we started, it had been, like I said, a halfway house for men for alcohol. So when we started, the board of directors would not let me or let us treat drug addicts. They said, nope, this is strictly for alcohol. That is how long ago it's been. We did not know much back then. Now, I knew because I'd already gone to school, but you know, I was the only woman that worked there, the only woman, you know, all the board were men and all of that. And so, but I knew that alcoholism was a drug. Alcohol was a drug. And a drug is a drug is a drug. It doesn't matter whether we drink it, shoot it up, what we do, it's still a drug. And so it wasn't long, probably a year, that they started letting us treat drug addicts also, because we were not getting a pure alcoholic. I mean, you show me a pure alcoholic today, and I mean, what a pure alcoholic is that's all they've ever used. And that's just unheard of in today's time. And it really was back then. We found very few just that only abused alcohol. So that was the beginning of looking at different addictions. And, you know, while I was working there and helping the drug addicts, alcoholics one day at a time there, I was dying from an eating disorder. Now, I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I had, you know, lost 100, 120, 140 pounds. I'd done that 5 different times and gained it back 4 different times, or was in the process of gaining it back the 5th time. You know, by the grace of God, a therapist that I'd hired out of LA that came to work for us. And you know, everything starts on the east and west coast and moves toward the center, and West Texas is the last to get the info. So what he shared with me was that he confronted me one day and said, I think you have an eating disorder. And he started describing my symptoms. Long story short, 2 days, or the night following Wednesday, I was in California, in LA, going through treatment for my eating disorder. So what I found out there, they treated me like we were treating the alcoholics, drug addicts every day. And that was as an addiction. And through the 12 steps and good therapy, And so I was taught that my eating disorder goes through an addiction process, much like drugs and alcohol. And I'll tell you, it does. Because I want to tell you what that process, that cycle of addiction is. And some of you, I've got some old timers on here. Y'all can tell it as well as I can because you've lived it. And you've lived to tell about it because you're on the screen. So the cycle is that it starts with a thought. Before we use anything, not a thought, it starts with a feeling. It starts with a feeling. Something has happened to us and we're irritable, restless, and discontented. Somebody's done us wrong. Somebody's done something. We're upset, maybe finances, whatever, but we have a feeling. Now, if we've used a substance before and it's changed the way we feel, when we get that thinking going, then the feeling comes, we get the feeling, and then the thought goes up into our brain and it says to us, I know how you can feel better. And that is either taking alcohol or a drug or food or whatever the addiction is that eases the pain of living for you. So it starts with a feeling. Something happens, we feel bad, and then we remember, get up in our brain, and we can remember the sense of ease and comfort that we get from having one drink or having a drug or overeating or whatever. So that thought pattern is in place. And then we stay in that thought pattern until it's strong. It is strong. And we know if we go toward that substance and we use whatever that substance is, we're going to feel better. Now, addicts are not a bunch of idiots. If we didn't get something out of using a substance, we'd do it once or twice and give it up. We think, oh, that's too costly. That takes up too much time. I'm not going to do that. But addicts, because we have a different brain chemistry, you must have the brain chemistry of an addict to get the kind of hits that we get, and I'm including myself, overusing a substance or a behavior. It changes the way we feel. Do you know that doesn't do that for normies? Shake your head if you know it doesn't do that for people without an addict brain. I mean, people, I've watched my little husband. Now, he was an alcoholic, but he was a pure alcoholic. That's all that I remember, and work addiction that he ever used. And when he sat down to eat a meal, and this is what normies do that are, normal people eat. Every time he sat down for a meal, he ate all he wanted, and he would eat till he got full, and then he would take his napkin and cover up the rest because he was done with the meal. Now, I couldn't understand that because I'm a food addict, and I would watch him be able to just stop when he was full. That was not in my frame of reference. So, but for him, once he took a drink of alcohol, he couldn't stop. Now, we can stop before we start. You know what I mean? We can stop drinking if we don't ever start it. Or we can stop overeating if we don't ever start it. But once we, get on a food binge, once we get on a binge, it's Katie bar the door till we get through that binge, and my kids, no one could stop me. Once I just wanted them to leave me alone so I could eat until I could ease the pain of living. So the purpose of, and this is all scientific, and I'm not going to go into the scientific part. What I'm going to say is Addictions are about brain and body chemistry. And for most addicts, any substance will do. And what happens, and it's what is the most that I have seen being in the field for over 50 years, what I see more than anything in switching addictions is that an alcoholic will get clean and sober, a drug addict will get clean and sober, and instantly go toward the food. And, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they used to talk, and they would teach us early on, when we were trying to sober up people in our homes. This was before detoxes and all. How we would detox people is we'd give them something with sugar. We'd feed them and bring them down, off of whatever substance they were using. So I've seen it many, many times where alcoholics or a drug addict will get clean and sober, work a good program, be, go to meetings, all of that, and switch addiction to food. I have seen it so many times. I've got one guy that was, he was almost the face of AA in Abilene, those people that are just always there and helpful. And he was one of the sweetest young men, and I knew him, from the time he was a Vietnam vet, and when he came back, he was a severe drug addict and alcoholic, and he, did a lot in his addiction, but then he got clean and sober, and he started eating, and he could not stop. And he ate, and he gained weight, and he ate, and he gained weight, and he ate. And he would come to see me after I came out here to Shades, and, I'd kind of joke with him. I'd say, well, I'm saving you a bed. He said, well, I need it, but I can't take off work. I can't take off work. I can't take off work to go to treatment. And long story short, he got diabetes, and he died, I guess, 3 years ago. And he was a wonderful member of the fellowship and helped a lot of people with drugs and alcohol. But he died of an addiction, and it's called food addiction. It doesn't matter what addiction we die from. When we die, we're dead. Whether it's alcohol, drugs, food, work, you name it. So that's when I really started getting interested in all addictions. I started getting interested in all addictions when I was in treatment in LA. And, and I would think of the people that would come in to where I worked at the Serenity House. And 9 out of 10 of them smoked. They were chain smokers. And at that time, the staff, I wanted them to smoke outside. Well, the board of directors let them smoke in the treatment center. And those curtains at one time, those drapes had been white, and they've turned, yellowish brown, the smoke. And so I'll tell you, until a person gets completely clean of every substance, our behavior, they're not sober. Think about that. Because the brain is still, like I said, this is a brain and body chemistry. That's what addiction is. It's about the brain. Our brains are built different than normies. Do y'all believe that? Shake your head if you believe it. We are different. We are our body. That's why, we really, so when I left the reason I left the Serenity House is I wanted to have a non-smoking unit. And I wanted to treat people for 42 days and let them see what their body would feel like completely off of any substance. Well, it's hard to, we ask for it. It's hard to treat people like that when they don't have anything to take the edge off. But what happened it still happens. is, well, one thing, I guess we're still the only non-smoking treatment center in the United States. I don't know, maybe there's some others that have joined us, but we started from the very beginning non-smoking. And we lost clients because they wouldn't come if they couldn't smoke. But addiction is addiction, and I didn't feel ethical bringing people in and letting them pay for treatment and let them use a substance. I could not get that in my head. So when people are here in treatment, they are absolutely detoxed from everything, because I want them to see for the first time how their body feels without using a substance. So, the substance is alcohol, drugs, food for some people, sugar can be highly addictive to some people, and then nicotine products. And now nicotine products includes those e-cigarettes, I mean, you name it. So there's a lot out there for people to get addicted to, but those are the substances. And now, in the early 80s, we started hearing about process addictions. And there was lots of research gone on about process addiction. A process addiction is behavior that you can't stop. It affects the same part of the brain that a substance does. And so I have told this before, work addiction came as close, if not closer, to killing me than my eating disorder did, because I was working, at the Serenity House. That was my baby. I got to start that from the ground up, and I loved the Serenity House. When I got back from treatment, I got all of that smoking outside. They had to smoke outside. They hated my guts, the clients did, at first, because I made changes. I changed the menu. And quit having so much sugar, there in the alcohol drug treatment center. And so what I knew that I wanted to treat all addictions. In fact, I started the eating disorder unit there at the Serenity House. Now, they didn't believe in eating disorders that much, but what they believed in was the money that I was going to put into there. The Serenity House was nonprofit, and it needed money, and I went to them, the board of directors, and I leased 4 beds. And the only reason they did that is because of the money. And then by the end of that year, I had 8 beds. And I knew that I could start a freestanding treatment center because we were getting more and more calls. And it was amazing how we would get these college girls here. We have 3 universities here. And we'd get these college girls out of, they would come to the Serenity House for bulimia or anorexia. And they would sit in the same groups with the drug addicts and alcoholics. Once you get past the substance, we're all the same. We are all the same. And what the same is we have a brain chemistry that when, one's too many and 1,000's not enough. And we don't have a cutoff valve. Addicts do not, on their own, have a way to, well, I'm not going to use that. I'm just not going to do that. Now, normies can say that. If my husband gained a little bit of weight, he loves being thin. And if his belt got a little tight, he would put himself on, not a diet, but he'd cut down on his food and, lose that half of or a quarter inch on his waist, So I'm saying not everyone has food addiction. But those who have food addiction are much like your drug addict and alcoholic. So I want to get back to the behavior, I can't even talk this morning, process addictions. We knew nothing about process addictions until there was research that started, and it usually starts on East or West Coast, and it usually starts out of a problem. once, people start looking at the problem, then they look for a solution for the problem. And so this is how a lot of process addiction has been, come to light, because they realized that it did the same part, it attacked the same pleasure part of the brain as drugs and alcohol or food or, substance does. And so we started looking at that. And work addiction, I mean, like I said, my work addiction almost killed me, more so than the food addiction, because I was working 80, 90 hours a week. And when I came out here, I worked all the time. I worked all of the time. If I wasn't working, I was thinking about it. I was not present for my family, my kids, no one. I was working. And that's how I got my good feelings about myself. And I could make all excuses in the world. Well, I had a new business. I had to be there. There was never a time that I wouldn't own the grounds of Serenity, of Shades of Hope. When we started, that happened for years and years. So work addiction is a big process addiction. And, there's 24 hours a day. You break it down, 8 hours rest, 8 hours work, and 8 hours play. Now, some people with, work 8, 9 hours, whatever. It's about getting balance in your work and not letting the work, the brain goes through a chemical reaction. The more you work, the more it wants you to work. And so that is, and there's a book that I recommend called Working Ourselves to Death, by I can't remember her name, but anyway, Diane Fassel. And so work addiction is a process addiction. Another process addiction that we knew nothing about until people started doing research, particularly on eating disorder people, particularly your compulsive overeaters. What we were seeing is people would get, when I say the compulsive overeaters, maybe, weighing 80, 90, 100 pounds overweight. Maybe they were like me, had never been thin, or maybe had been thin for a few days or a few hours and gained it back, whatever. And so they started looking primarily at compulsive overeaters and how they would lose the weight, and then they would feel good about themselves. And the first thing, and this is what I did, when I got home from treatment, I couldn't drive. I was just like a deer on new legs. I was shattered when I came home from treatment. That was on Friday, but by Monday I was raring to go. And the first place I wanted to go was the mall. I had taken a few days off before I went back to work. And I knew that I had to get something to fill up this hole in my soul that food had filled up, because it felt like a vacant building in here. And I was irritable, restless, and discontented because I had used food since I was 4 years old. And I was a volume eater. It took a lot of volume for me to push the feelings down. So here I was on this, food plan and dedicated to it, still am. But I had these big feelings, so I went to the mall and I had a credit card and I charged through that mall, frontwards, backwards, crossways, and I did that for 1 year. And I run up a pretty big bill. My husband, bless his heart, would done anything for me, and he said, I'll pay it off. I said, no, I need to do that. And that wasn't that easy to do, because I didn't want to quit getting the high off of the buying and the, half the time I'd take the stuff back, but it's just going through that thrill of going down, through the mall and just buying. So I knew that I needed help, so there wasn't a Debtors Anonymous here, so I went to Dallas to Debtors Anonymous. And then I brought the meeting back here, and we had a meeting here in Buffalo Gap for about a year. That is one of the hardest meetings to keep going, because once you get into people's pocketbooks, You get into their money, they do not want to talk about it until they're ready, and they're usually not ready until they have hit rock bottom. So, compulsive spending, compulsive shopping, and this is what a lot of your eating disorder people will switch over from the overeating or the bulimics. I mean, a bulimic, you give me, and I'm a recovered bulimic. When a bulimic stops purging, they're going to find some way to purge, and the way that they will find, and that is usually overbuying, the over shopping, and also the overweight. I won't say just the overweight. We've seen this happen with anorexics. Anorexics usually are asexual. I mean, when they come to us, they have no sex drive. They don't, anyway. If you can help us refeed an anorexic and get them into a normal body weight, what happens a lot of times with them, of course, they will not. Now, sometimes they will go toward compulsive overeating, but very seldom. What they're going to go toward is relationships, because they have put relationships on hold. And if they're married, a lot of times they will switch. Anyway, relationships are a big deal with people with eating disorders. And your compulsive overeaters, once they lose the weight, they get to thinking they're really cute, and they are, and they get frisky, and, they've been with that guy for the longest, and he's never, he doesn't compliment her, he doesn't say, I love you, he doesn't say, you look nice, any of that. So her eye rolls, and we've seen it over and over and over, that they'll get into a love affair at work's the best place, I mean, not the best, or at church. We've seen it over and over at church, because here's a woman that has gone to church for years, overweight, and then she gets thin and gets very attractive and gets very active in her church, and she might serve on lots of committees. And she might even volunteer to do work with the pastor. We've seen it over and over again where there's affairs in the church. And it starts a lot of times with the women finally feeling good about themselves, not just the women, the men too. So it's about switching addictions. Another process addiction, we've talked about work, we've talked about food. Another switch is getting obsessed with anything, anything like cleanliness, like your kids. You can get in, we can get obsessed and overdo with just about anything. But a process addiction, it is love and sex addiction. If you haven't heard the lectures on love and sex addiction, most of you have been to an intensive, and you've heard about the love and sex addiction. And it's the love addict. The love addict, and a lot of times your love addict does not get into love addiction until they lose the weight and they feel good about themselves. And then that's when they'll go into the love addiction. We've seen it over and over and over. Sex addiction is a process addiction, and it must be treated as an addiction. Our founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W., had a flash of light spiritual experience while he was being detoxed the last time. I mean, he saw an image in that room. He heard God speak to him, and instantly, the desire to drink was removed from Bill. We find that that doesn't happen many times. I could count on one hand the number of alcoholics that I've treated that have had that flash of light type of spiritual experience and had the desire to drink removed instantly. But it happened for Bill. It really happened for Bill. But keep in mind, Bill was a heavy smoker. He never quit smoking. In fact, our two co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous died of nicotine-related diseases. They died of addiction. You know, you can call it what you want. Addiction is addiction. He was sober from alcohol, but him and Dr. Bob both died of it goes back to the nicotine, smoking for years. And then Bill had another problem, and it was called sex, and it was called women. And Lois knew it. And Bill had a mistress. 3 cents of every big book and I guess it's still going, I don't know, used to 3 cents out of every big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that was bought went into a trust fund for his mistress. Lois, his wife, knew about the mistress. That is another addiction. That is a process addiction, love and sex addiction. And that can ruin more families, bring more heartache. It's right up there with alcoholism. So the point is, we must get clean in everything. Every substance, and I will tell you, you can't do it all at one time. Tackle one at a time, unless you're in inpatient treatment. And I used to get criticized across the board with other treatment centers that I wouldn't allow our clients to smoke. And I said, why would I do that? Why? And we'd give them 7 days a step down program where they could stop, and we couldn't make them stop smoking. We just wouldn't take them if they didn't agree to stop smoking. I wanted them to feel what it was like to be substance free. And because if you smoke or use, nicotine at all, but if you smoke, you get an instant hit off of smoking, and it changes that brain, and that's what we go for. And then it changes how we feel in here, and it gives us that sense of ease and comfort. The sense of ease and comfort is what we go for in any addiction. Think about that. The sense of ease and comfort. Because doesn't it make sense that if we're going toward wanting to feel better, that we have felt worse, that we have felt bad? So the solution then, and that's why we started when I got home from treatment, they didn't do a lot of the work that we do here at Shades. But I got clean of the food. I got squeaky clean. And I knew I had more work to do. I knew, because I had never addressed any sexual abuse. I'd never addressed any of that. I had on paper, I'd written it out in, 4 steps and all of that, but I still carried it. And so I started doing training in different places with some of the pioneers to learn how to do what we do in the intensives here. And so every time I'd go for training, I'd have to go back and do my own work. I'd go back for, as a client. And so what the problem is that core pain. And that core pain, and I've never worked with any addict yet, ever, that when, they'll come in and say, I just had the best childhood. There was nothing wrong with my childhood. Perfect childhood. Well, we're not trying to make your family bad or wrong. All we want to help you get to is where your core pain is coming from, because it's the pain that tells the brain that you need some relief. And then the brain, if you are an addict, it will click in and say, well, you need to go eat, you need to go drink, you need to go have an affair, whatever, to ease the pain. So the core pain is what when I say the intensives, for those of you that have never done one, the intensives here are intense. They are, because we take 4.5 days and we help clients get to the core pain that they've been carrying around all of their life. And it usually happens in childhood. We used to say those first 6 or 7 years. Yes, a lot of it takes place in those very early years. But then it's can be older or it's ongoing abuse. If you were raised in an abusive home, it's ongoing. That abuse is ongoing. Now you might have grown up and got yourself out of that house real quick, but you took the pain with you. And that's that core pain that when we get into that pain of the past, if you're an addict of any sort, what your brain tells you is to go use something to make yourself feel better. Like I said, we're not a bunch of idiots. If we didn't, if we didn't have pain, we wouldn't seek a solution for it. So, on these switching addictions, what happens? Healing, we get sick from the inside out, and we must heal from the inside out. Do y'all believe that? We get sick from the inside out, and that's where the healing has got to happen, is from the inside out. And then once we do that, we're like an empty vessel. And it's painful to do this work and go around. And if you're abstinent or you are clean and sober, you're not using a substance. The solution for addiction, folks, is so simple that we miss it, is that vacant building must be replaced by a God of your understanding. It's a spiritual problem. Addictions are a spiritual problem. In that, what that spiritual problem is that we have lost ourselves in the process of the addiction. And so recovery is a spiritual solution. And that's what the 12 steps work. So, better than any modality out there, and people can say it's old fashioned, it's over, underrated. I'll let them say what they want to say. But I will stack up people that I have known and have treated through the years. Yes, we do this work with them, but just doing the work makes you an empty vessel. Then you've got to fill that vessel up with the God of your understanding. Instead of reaching for the food, reach out. And how you reach out for spirituality, you reach out to another recovering person. That's why we have sponsors. You pick up the phone and you call somebody and say, I want to go drink. I want to go overeat. I want to do something. And the sponsor will never tell you not to do it, but they will talk you through it and help you go from that thought pattern. They'll help you think it all the way to the end, because and then see the consequences. If we don't see the consequences, we'll just keep relapsing over and over. It's the consequences that get us, that is the consequences that makes us want to recover, because the consequences are painful. We've had people that have lost everything in their life, everything. But once they gain sobriety and recovery, they may not even want some of those things back that they lost, but they are going to find a new way to live. And so recovery is about, you don't take away one behavior without replacing it with the other. Once you take away the substance, if you don't, you have to be aware of not reaching out for another one. If you're recovering from work addiction, be real careful that you don't fill that vacant building up with food or with, maybe a glass of wine at night. If you've got the brain of an addict, whatever you use can become addicted. I'm not saying it will, but if you use long enough, it will. So that's why it's recovery is an ongoing process. There's not a quick fix, but recovery takes work, and it is worth it. And the process addictions can kill us as well as the substance can. And work addiction is right up there at the top of the list. Work addiction I'm just a complete blank of, I don't know what's going on with me this morning. But there are a list of process addictions. And it's, a lot of people, like I said, will trade one addiction for the other. And until you can get into that core pain and heal from the inside out, you'll keep finding things to put in that hole in your soul, which the only thing that's going to help an addict, I believe, is finding a spiritual way to live. So that's pretty kind of hit and miss there, but I hope you've gotten the gist of what a process addiction is. It's anything that you reach out to change the way you feel. And you keep doing it and you keep doing it until it becomes a problem. I'll give you an example. There was a little boy up in the Northwest, and his father was one that started a tech company years and years and years ago, one of the very first tech companies. His dad was gone all of the time. And, building a business and all that. And so the kid had one of the best computers money could buy at that time. And he was about 12 years old, and he figured out a way to get past those parents, where they put parental lockdowns where you can't get to pornography and all. Anyway, he figured out a way. He was as smart as his dad. He figured out a way to get past that, and he got into pornography at age 12. This is a process addiction, folks, at age 12. And it got to bothering him. He couldn't do his schoolwork, and all he wanted to do was get on that computer and look at porn. And his body was just beginning to develop, and he was confused. And, so one day his dad, he got up early so he could see his dad before his dad went to work. And he asked his dad was going out the door, and he opened that computer and he said, "I can't stop doing this. Look at this." And the dad took the computer, slammed it shut, and he said, "That's how you stop looking at it." Gave the computer back to the kid. You stop looking at it. Well, he didn't stop. It got worse, it got worse, it got worse. And then it went from using the pornography to the kid started using, marijuana and different drugs. And finally, the dad got it, that it was a problem, that it was the sex addiction that was a problem. The porn addiction is a process addiction. And what that dad did is he sold that company, and he started being a parent. And, he had all the money in the world, and he started staying home being a parent. And that's what was missing in that young boy's life. So that's what I have. Have any of you ever switched from a substance to a process addiction? And if you have, give us what you switched to. Who wants to start?